Doug Ford's strategic betrayal, how his actions gave Carney's Liberals a victory over Poilievre. The 2025 Canadian federal election marked a defining moment for the Conservative movement, offering what many believed was the best opportunity in years to unseat the increasingly scandal-plagued Liberal government. With Pierre Poilievre at the helm, the federal Conservatives mounted a focused campaign centered on affordability, law and order, and a promise to restore common-sense governance. Yet, as the dust settled, it became increasingly clear that their campaign had been hampered not only by Liberal attacks and media bias, but by a far more surprising source: Ontario Premier Doug Ford. While Poilievre attempted to unify Conservatives across the country behind a platform of fiscal responsibility and personal freedom, Ford's conduct throughout the election season gave rise to accusations of betrayal. Many grassroots Conservatives, campaign insiders, and even elected officials have privately and publicly accused the Ontario Premier of sabotaging the federal campaign, either out of self-interest or quiet alignment with Mark Carney's Liberals. Unlike Poilievre, who went out of his way to avoid entanglement with provincial matters during Ontario's last election, Ford showed no such restraint. As federal Conservatives launched a high-stakes bid to reclaim government, Ford's lukewarm, sometimes hostile, approach to Poilievre became glaringly apparent. His public jabs at the federal leader's messaging and economic approach were seized upon by Liberal-aligned media to paint the Conservatives as divided, disorganized, and lacking credibility on core issues like the economy and public trust. To Conservative supporters, Ford's behavior wasn't just unhelpful, it was strategic sabotage. At the height of the campaign, Ford's refusal to endorse Poilievre or even express qualified support sent a damaging signal to Ontario's moderate voters and longtime party loyalists. Many viewed his conduct as an effort to curry favor with a future Carney-led Liberal government, perhaps to safeguard provincial funding or to position himself as a kingmaker in post-election negotiations. Speculation deepened when Ford praised Mark Carney in vague but noticeable terms, calling him competent, serious, and a reasonable voice in national affairs. To many Conservatives, these weren't harmless words, they were a signal of ideological drift. Ford, once elected on a populist wave, now appeared more comfortable in elite Liberal circles than with the working-class base that helped him win his majority. This was not a matter of mere optics. Ford's actual policies throughout his premiership have increasingly strayed from the values federal Conservatives campaigned on. Under his leadership, Ontario maintained high personal and business taxes, introduced a provincial carbon tax despite widespread voter opposition, and increased provincial spending at levels that mirrored the federal Liberals. These choices undercut Poilievre's campaign message and left voters in Canada's largest province wondering, if a Conservative premier behaves like a Liberal, why should we believe the federal party would govern any differently? Then there's the controversy surrounding Corey Tanike, Ford's campaign director and longtime political operative. Tanike's behind-the-scenes influence reportedly extended into federal politics, whereas critiques of Poilievre's strategy, leaked and amplified through friendly media, further fractured Conservative unity. Some insiders have gone as far as to claim that Tanike, in coordination with Ford's inner circle, actively worked to steer resources and attention away from federal campaigns in key Ontario ridings. Whether this was motivated by ego, pragmatism, or a deeper ideological split remains up for debate. Making matters worse, Ford's decision to trigger a provincial mini-election in the middle of the federal race was interpreted by many as an intentional distraction. The timing siphoned volunteer capacity, media bandwidth, and financial resources from critical federal battlegrounds. The result? A fragmented Conservative base in Ontario, confused, divided, and dispirited, while the Liberals capitalized on the chaos to consolidate support in suburban ridings crucial to forming a government. The consequences were stark. In swing ridings across the Greater Toronto Area and key regions of southern Ontario, the federal Conservatives underperformed relative to polling expectations and internal benchmarks. Analysts point to voter hesitation caused by Ford's anti-Poilievre rhetoric and the perceived lack of cohesion between federal and provincial Conservatives. In some ridings, Conservative canvassers were reportedly confronted by voters asking why Ford opposed Poilievre, confusion that Liberal candidates were only too happy to exploit. Inside the Conservative Party, frustration quickly turned to anger. Prominent figures like Jamil Jivani didn't mince words, directly accusing Ford of prioritizing his political capital over the broader health of the conservative movement. Jivani and others argue that Ford's posturing created a trust gap that weakened the conservative brand in the eyes of suburban and multicultural voters, a key demographic Poilievre had made significant inroads with prior to the election. The stakes go beyond one election. Ford's maneuvering has opened deep fissures within the conservative coalition, exposing ideological and strategic divisions that have long simmered under the surface. On one side are federal conservatives advocating for a return to core principles: fiscal discipline, smaller government, public safety, and a culture of accountability. On the other, a faction led by Ford and supported by establishment operatives who appear more interested in political expediency, patronage, and consensus with the liberal status quo. Ford's defenders claim that his actions were pragmatic. They argue that as Premier of Ontario, his primary responsibility is to the province, not the federal party. They suggest his alignment with Ottawa, whether liberal or otherwise, was aimed at securing funding and stability for Ontario's economy. Yet this line of defense raises more questions than it answers. If Ford truly believes in conservative principles, why did he not see the value in helping elect a federal government that shares those values? And if he does not support those principles, what does that say about the long-term direction of the Ontario PC party? There's also the question of Ford's own ambitions. Some political observers have floated the idea that Ford, eyeing a potential national role in the post-Poilievre era, intentionally distanced himself from the federal campaign to preserve his reputation among centrists and potential liberal voters. By positioning himself as a moderate or a bridge builder, Ford may believe he's setting himself up as a unifying figure in future federal leadership contests or negotiations. But to many grassroots conservatives, this reeks of opportunism, a betrayal of the very movement that brought him to power. As Conservative Party regroups from its electoral setback, hard conversations must be had. Unity cannot be taken for granted. The conservative movement needs to clearly define what it stands for, who it serves, and how its federal and provincial wings will collaborate or clash in the years ahead. If Doug Ford continues down his current path, the federal party may be forced to openly confront him or risk further erosion of public trust and internal cohesion. Looking forward, Pierre Poilievre faces a critical choice: attempt to reconcile with Ford and hope for better cooperation, or draw a clear line in the sand to reassert leadership and message discipline. Either way, clarity is needed. The conservative base, disillusioned by Ford's actions and craving authentic leadership, deserves answers. In the wake of this election, one truth stands out: a divided conservative movement cannot defeat a united liberal machine. If the party is serious about winning the next election, it must address the elephant in the room, Doug Ford, and rebuild the trust lost during one of the most consequential betrayals in recent Canadian political history. Only through unity, conviction, and a commitment to genuine conservative values can the movement hope to recover and mount a successful challenge to the Liberal Party's grip on power.